Welcome, everyone, to today's deep dive. We're taking you into, well, the really atmospheric, shadowed alleys of Old Delhi. We're here to unravel a story that genuinely challenges how we think about faith, family, and justice. Our mission today is to unpack the tragic and frankly pretty perplexing case of the Sharma family. It became known as the Old Delhi haunting and trial. We've looked through quite a few sources, and they paint this vivid picture of fervent devotion meeting a truly horrifying reality. And it all led to a court case that, well, it defied easy answers. So at the center of this story, you have the Sharma family, particularly Arjun Sharma. He was 26 years old, and by all accounts, the real pride of his family. But then something changed. Really suddenly and alarmingly. Arjun went through this terrifying transformation. His eyes, they said, seemed to burn with this unnatural intensity. His voice changed too, becoming like a menacing growl, and he started scratching himself, talking about self-harm. It just seemed like a complete descent into, well, madness. His parents, Vikram, who's 64, and Lakshmi, 56, they saw all this happening, this escalating horror.
And they became absolutely convinced, utterly certain, that an evil spirit had somehow claimed their son.
Yeah, and what's really striking here is how deeply their next steps were rooted in their beliefs. The Sharmas, you see, were devout followers of a mystic temple right there in Chandni Chowk. So instead of, say, seeking conventional medical help for Arjun's condition, Lakshmi went for guidance to Pandit Rakesh. He was a revered priest known locally for battling dark forces. And the Pandit, according to the accounts, he spoke of ancient rituals, specific prayers, the kind believed to banish demons. This conversation then led the whole family, Vikram, Lakshmi, and all their sons. Rohan, 33, Anil, 32, Samir, 26, and the twins Dev and Dhruv, just 20 years old. It led them to start this intense 3-day ritual. It took place right in their dimly lit courtyard. You can almost picture it, right? Incense, smoke thick in the air, the flicker of diyas, those little oil lamps casting these eerie shadows. They were preparing for what they saw as a spiritual battle.
And what actually happened during those 3 days inside that haveli. It's really disturbing to recount. Arjun, who was once their pride, was now thrashing, apparently quite violently. He was bound with ropes to a charpoi, that's a traditional Indian cot. And the family chanted mantras around him, believing these words had the power to expel the spirit. Vikram, the father, his voice reportedly trembling but filled with this desperate resolve, he told his sons to take turns holding Arjun down. He specifically mentioned using unyielding strength to keep him absolutely still. Rohan, one of the older sons, he later confessed that seeing his brother's face like that, so contorted, it haunted him deeply. But he also said, crucially, that he saw it as a family matter, not for outsiders. And throughout this whole ordeal, nobody called for any outside help. What does that detail tell us about the sort of cultural context they were in, resisting help like that?
That's a really critical point. It speaks volumes about the profound sense of family loyalty, sometimes called Maryada in that context. It often prioritizes keeping family affairs internal, above almost everything else. For them, this wasn't just a problem, it was a deep personal spiritual crisis affecting one of their own. Bringing in outsiders, especially people who might not understand their spiritual framework, well, that could feel like a betrayal, or maybe even admitting weakness. It also really highlights that clash of worldviews, doesn't it?
Definitely.
They saw a demon possessing their son, not necessarily a medical emergency requiring doctors, and they believed, guided by the Pandit, that they were the only ones equipped to fight it. So as this ritual went on, the atmosphere in the haveli, which is this large traditional kind of mansion, it just grew thicker with dread. Arjun's screams, we learned from the sources, they echoed through the house, mixing with the family's own quite fevered prayers. Neighbors apparently started whispering. They heard strange noises, felt this kind of darkness coming from the Sharma home. Then the narrative takes us to the third night. It was Anil, one of the sons, who finally made the call. He dialed for an ambulance. His voice was apparently shaking. And he only mentioned Arjun's suffering from dehydration. Didn't mention the binding or the ritual.
Just dehydration.
Just dehydration.
Yeah.
But by the time paramedics arrived, it was too late. Arjun was lying still. His body was cold. Still under the weight, you could say, of this family's desperate ritual. It's just a harrowing image, isn't it?
Absolutely.
That an act driven by what they perceived as love could end so tragically.
Utterly harrowing. So, okay, what happens then when this desperate act moves from the privacy of the haveli into the very public and harsh light of the legal system? The Sharmas found themselves on trial in a Delhi court. And the charges were serious. Manslaughter, false imprisonment, causing harm to a vulnerable person. Now, in the legal system, proving something like manslaughter, it often comes down to intent, right? Or at least gross negligence. And the prosecution, they painted this chilling picture for the court.
A family consumed by superstition, binding, and effectively tormenting Arjun until his life just slipped away. Legally speaking, that sounds, well, it sounds pretty clear-cut on the surface, doesn't it? How did the defense even start to counter accusations like that?
It certainly wasn't simple, no. And this is where the trial really throws the complexity of the whole situation into sharp relief. The defense's counter-argument was absolutely pivotal. They insisted strongly that the family's actions came from profound love and deep-seated belief, not from malice.
Love and belief, not malice.
Exactly. Vikram, the father, he vehemently denied any suggestion of occult practices. He insisted their faith was pure, that this was a desperate attempt, their only perceived way to save their son, and that not guilty verdict we'll get to. It really underscores this huge legal challenge. How do you actually prosecute intent when the people accused genuinely believe they're acting out of love, believing they're fighting an unseen evil force, acting out of necessity as they see it? It highlights this fundamental clash, really, a clash between legal definitions of harm and these deeply ingrained spiritual convictions. It makes establishing criminal intent incredibly difficult for any court.
So it wasn't just about what they did, but why they truly believed they were doing it. That was key. And the courtroom itself, apparently, it became this sort of cauldron of tension. You had spectators murmuring about curses, about restless spirits, reflecting the same kind of deep-seated beliefs prevalent in the community.
The atmosphere was charged.
And then, after days of testimony, the judge delivers this verdict. And it shocked many people. Not guilty. On all charges. The Sharmas walked free. Faces showing, I imagine, this profound mix of relief, but also undeniable grief. Now that outcome, for a lot of people, it felt deeply counterintuitive, especially given that Arjun had died during their actions. Could you maybe elaborate a bit more? How might the defense have successfully argued against things like malice? How did they effectively present the case that the actions were rooted purely in belief, not criminal intent?
Certainly. The defense likely hammered home the point that the family genuinely, truly believed Arjun was possessed. And crucially, that everything they did, in their own understanding, was meant to be curative. They weren't trying to harm him. They were trying to heal him from what they perceived as this external, malevolent force.
A rescue mission, in their eyes.
Precisely. They probably emphasized the cultural context, too, where spiritual healing, while maybe controversial to some, is a recognized practice for others. Proving that's the legal term for criminal intent, it becomes incredibly difficult when the defendants genuinely believe they are saving a life, not taking one. The prosecution would have had to prove, beyond reasonable doubt, that the Sharmas knew, or reasonably should have known, that their actions would lead to Arjun's death.
And that their religious beliefs didn't somehow excuse that knowledge.
Exactly. And in cases like this, courts often grapple with defining the boundaries of what constitutes reasonable belief, especially in a culturally diverse society like India. So the judge likely had to weigh the prosecution's evidence of harm against the defense's powerful narrative of genuine, if tragically misguided, parental love and spiritual conviction.
Right. So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into the Old Delhi haunting and trial, what we're left with is this incredibly complex and, yes, tragic interplay. You've got faith, tradition, sheer desperation, and then a legal system really struggling to make sense of it all. We've seen how a family's profound beliefs, their absolute conviction they were fighting an unseen evil, how it led to this terrible outcome, and then followed by a court decision that, let's be honest, left many people with more questions than answers.
It really did. And this case, it reveals so much, doesn't it, about the boundaries of conviction itself. Where does deep faith end and perhaps delusion begin, especially in the eyes of the law?
A very fine line sometimes.
A very fine line. It also forces us, and you listening, to consider how we interpret a crisis. When one person sees an illness needing a doctor and another sees an evil spirit needing an exorcism. And what about that profound weight of family loyalty, facing what they truly sincerely believe to be evil incarnate in their own home? The Haveli in Old Delhi, it still stands there, silent now, its ancient walls holding secrets that perhaps no court could ever truly unravel. Some locals say Arjun's spirit still lingers there, whispering in the night, maybe seeking answers, or perhaps seeking vengeance.
It's a blank thought.
And it leaves us, and you, with this final kind of provocative thought to mull over. In these quiet, ancient corners of our world, where exactly do we draw the line between the sacred and the tragic? And can our systems of justice ever truly account for the unseen forces that people genuinely believe govern their lives?